Hi, I'm your host, Jürgen Strauss from Innova.Buzz, and I'm really excited to welcome to the Innova.Buzz podcast today from Los Angeles in the USA, Beate Chelette, who's the growth architect and founder of the Women's Code. Welcome to the Innova.Buzz podcast, Beate. It's a real privilege to have you here as my guest.
Thank you so much for having me, Jürgen. I am very excited to be speaking to you about all things business and growth and scaling.
Excellent. And you're also host of the Business Growth Architect Show, where you do talk about those things. So I'm really looking forward to exploring all those topics some more. Before we do that, though, what's the impact you're making in the world today, Beate?
My impact really is about taking the knowledge that I've learned on the many, many years I've been in the coaching and consulting and strategy space and helping others with big ideas, how to land their planes and give them all the shortcuts on how to get there as quickly as they possibly can without making the same mistakes I did, hopefully.
Yes, helping others learn from your mistakes.
I mean, truly, if I already made them, you don't need to make them again.
Yes. That's one of the things I say quite often. I say it's good to make mistakes as long as you learn from them, but there's no need to repeat other people's mistakes.
There you go. I like that.
Yeah. Now, so growth architect, what does a growth architect do?
So the idea of growth architecture and being a growth architect was born because, and I'm sure this is something you can relate to. Originally being from Germany, I think that this systematic approach to certain things might run in my veins. So I've always felt that while I loved creativity and I understood how creatives think, and I work with a lot of creative people with really big ideas, that there's a part about the way my brain operates is when I hear something, I immediately want to break it down in step 1 through 5 or 1 through 10. I mean, it's almost going automatically. And so when I looked deeper into that, I recognized that there were two things that were going on. Number one, there is a cadence to how you grow, build, and scale a business, and eventually, set it up for acquisition if that's your sort of thing. And there is a particular way that I approach on how business building really works. And so when I married these two, I designed growth architecture, and I'm the growth architect. And I want you to think about this, that when you build a house, like you buy the lot, and then once you have the lot, you need to build a foundation, because without the foundation, like we've seen here in the United States with all the hurricanes, the house just blows away. So you have to build a proper foundation. You have to follow a blueprint. It has to be, built according to the now best practices of what we know can happen. But how you decorate your house, on whether you have blue walls or green walls or yellow walls, whether you're putting an oversized bathtub or a shower in, I don't really care. I'm just going to help you with building the structure so you can furnish it.
Yeah, I love that. And one of the things you said at the beginning there was the contrast, if you like, creativity and innovation with systems and structure. And one of the things I always ran up against in my corporate career when I was trying to introduce systems and structure was people who'd say, but we're creatives, that's going to hamper or hinder our creativity. And I think what you've just described is a really good argument against that.
Yeah, because people, I think that a lot of times what people don't understand is that there is the craft part, the knowledge part of your business, and then there is the business part of the business. So in the ideal world, a creative says, I want to be a creative so I don't have to do the business, only to find out that the creative part is 20% and the business is 80%. Or you are a coach and a consultant, only to find out that, finding clients and building all that stuff, that's 80%, and the actual working with clients only 20%. And you want to keep shifting these percentages by building these systems and strategies, which is what you and I do. We help people to build these structures, blueprints around their ideas so that these systems are producing results and they can be more in their zone of genius, which is why they started a business in the first place. But no matter where you are in business, you always have these two pieces. You always have the business, and then you have the thing that you do. And both of these need attention.
Yeah, that's a really good explanation. I find that I'm building systems and documenting systems for even the very smallest of things, because something I do repetitively every week, even this podcast, for example, I have a whole structure around the framework of the episode. Now, it sounds like it's a natural conversation, which it is. However, there is a framework that underpins that whole natural conversation. And without that framework, I would be distracted by thinking, what do I have to do next, or where, what things do I need to remember to make sure that everything is covered in the podcast? And that would distract me from actually having the conversation, having a meaningful conversation, which is the purpose that I really want to achieve. By having that framework, it frees me up. And it's the same for everything in the business.
100%. And, what do they say? Structure creates freedom. And the structure just means that you don't have to think about what's next, because you already have the cadence down. So, let's say, just by the example of the podcast, and make that sort of really clear to your listener, is so there's an introduction, and then there's the welcome, and then there is, what's the main idea of the conversation today? What is this person bringing to the podcast that I haven't heard, or what's the angle that I want to give it? So these are all things that now, once we're in the conversation, because you do your prep work and you're very diligent about this, and so now we can focus on what we want to talk about. We don't have to, as you said, think about anything else. That's what creates the freedom, and then the freedom to actually move within that, in that structure that you created.
Okay. You talked about the metaphor of building a house, or building a physical structure, and starting with the foundation. What, for those that perhaps don't have systems documented, or are still kind of coming to terms with the whole idea, where should they start?
Yes, that is really an excellent place to start a conversation on, because, most of the time what happens, somebody has an idea, and then they don't really know what happens once you have this idea, or if the idea is even fleshed out. So we created something that's called the 5-Star Success Blueprint. And I'm going to just take you through this so that our listener really knows on sort of what the simple steps are. And they're really simple steps. They're work, but they're simple steps. So number one, you flesh out the idea. What is it that you're doing? Why are you the one who does it? Who wants what you're buying, and what problem does it solve? That has to be fleshed out first. Once you have that, you go to the second step. The second step is the creation of the offer. And in the offer, you look at, what the problem is that you're solving, and who the person is, and what their financial abilities are. And then you create an offer that's specific to the problem that you've identified that you can solve. Once you have your offer, you move to the third piece, and the third piece are the systems. Then we're looking at how can we automate and put this offer delivery of the solution on autopilot as much as we possibly can. Once we have the systems fleshed out, then and only then do we start to hire. That's when we're building the team, because then we know who we need to operate which systems that manage the offer that then is delivered to the client solving a problem. And then the final one gets to you as the leader, because once we have these pieces in place, then we look at you as the leader and we say, who do you need to be to manage the team that handles the system, that delivers the offer to the clients, that solves their problem?
Yeah, I love that. And there's a couple of things that occurred to me as you were describing that, and what they were kind of mistakes that I see business owners making all the time. Often business owners will hire staff at the point where they say, I don't have the time to do everything, so I'll hire somebody. So let's say I hire somebody to do this thing because I don't really enjoy that, or they might think, yes, my time's better used over here, so I'll get somebody to do this. They hire somebody, and then after a little while, it's just not working. I can go back to doing it myself. And part of the issue there is because there's nothing documented, no system in place for that person to do the work the way that I, as the business owner, want it done. There's no training in place, which is a system as well. And then also that last piece that you talked about, giving a thought to, well, what do I need to be to lead this person and bring this person on board and engage this person in a way that they share my vision for what I'm trying to do here.
Jürgen,
so do you see that happening all the time?
Oh my God, all the time. I think you nailed one of the biggest issues. I call this mini-me cloning. And the mini-me cloning goes when the business owner goes like, gee, I just wished I had 5 people just like me that do 20 different things and none of them really good. But that way we could all manage each other doing the exact same thing. And then they are absolutely shocked that this doesn't work. Or they bring on a virtual assistant or an assistant of some sort, and they look at this assistant and say, well, you get good reviews. So what can you do for me? The assistant goes like, I don't know. What do you need me to do? And then the business owner says, well, I mean, what do you usually do? Then the assistant says, well, like I typically, do some social media. Then the business owner says, great, go ahead, do that for me. But they don't understand that without that framework that we were just talking about, that blueprint in place, people are being set up to fail because there is no accountability, there's no job description, there is no system. If I bring on an assistant in my business, and I'm sure it's the same with you, because we have it all systematized with project management software. We have a CRM that does a lot of the steps, and a lot of it is automated, and then some of this needs to be monitored. So when we bring somebody on, we can tell them exactly, you are responsible for this portion in the system, and here's how it works. That's the only way to grow. That's the only way to grow successfully and rapidly. And it's the only way to set up people for success. Because how can somebody succeed if they don't know what they're doing for you?
Yeah. What's your view on when you bring on staff and you train them, say, here's how to do this particular task that's in your job description, here's the system for running that. In terms of then improving that system, how do you go about that? I mean, it sounds like that might be part of your, what do I need to be as the business owner to make sure my people can be successful? My view is that at that moment, once that person owns that task, I say, you look at where the process can be improved and rewrite the process if necessary or adapt the process. How do you see that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's if you are an aware business owner, so let's make the assumption that everybody who's listening is on the aware side. The reason your business will grow is because you hire people who are smarter at certain tasks than you are. If you are, I read this great quote. It says, A people hire A people, B people hire C people, because they always have to be better than everybody else. When I hired a virtual assistant in the Philippines, and I didn't really have great experiences with assistants in the Philippines, so I was a little jaded, I'll admit that. And then this young woman just absolutely blew my mind. And then, one day we were having a conversation. She says, yeah, I've always feel like I'm a little off because I have an engineering degree and I'm really not coming from the virtual assistant side. And my jaw dropped. And I said, no wonder you are so good at what you do. I said, don't ever apologize for having an engineering degree. Will you please make that the hero of how you promote your services, that you come at this with an engineering mind, which is exactly what business owners need. And then she would go and she would do things like where she sent me a message on Slack and she says, "Were you on the website again making updates?" Question mark, stern face.
Yeah.
And I said, "I might have." And she goes, "Why do you do that?" And I'm like, "Well, she has a point. Should I really be doing this?" And so now, going back to the awareness piece, which I said earlier, now you have to go as a business owner and you go like, yeah, I think that as a CEO of my company, I probably should not be doing that. It's probably not a good use of my time, which, by the way, what we tell other people. But then, it's just a small thing, right? It's just Saturday morning. It's just a small thing. And you see it, you may as well just go in there and fix it. But should you be doing that? Or would it be easier to just, pop it in whatever your project management software, shoot it over and say, hey, in the next update, fix this, because it's not a good spend of your time. So I think that that's really the part where when we are onboarding people and we're clear about who we're hiring, to say, this person better be better than I am at this. And then when they say something, do I listen and have another example for you? So I typically, in our cadence, so I record a content video that's somewhere between 3 and 5 minutes long. Then we have a process on how that goes to the video editor. It goes to YouTube. It goes to the writer. It gets turned into a blog post. So I want you to think about this like if you were to take all your knowledge and you take the knowledge and you put it in a knowledge bread, right? And then we take a bread knife and we cut it into slices. And so it's different kind of slices. And now we're looking at, how do I offer this? So I offer one piece as an online course, one piece as a mastermind, one piece as a done with you, one piece as a workshop, one piece as a free masterclass. So now I have all these different options. That's what I mean with scaling impact, Jürgen, because you take all the pieces that you have and then you roll them out in different pieces. And that allows your potential client, your prospect, to come in and self-identify where they fall. So somebody, for example, may come to you and say, I have an idea for a podcast. So they would be in your system very early on, right? They would be in the flushing out the idea. So there'll be a program for that. Then once they have the idea and they go, okay, I'm ready. Then they're going into the next phase, which is the where do I find guests piece, and and how do I create this, and the production piece. And then the next piece might be something, okay, so now we're producing it. Now we're finding guests. Now it's about maximizing the impact that the podcast has, right? Like, what's our conversion strategy to take listeners to bring them into as paying clients? So now you have an offer where people can say, oh no, I already know what I'm doing. So they don't need number one, but they need number two. Or somebody says, no, I don't need that, but can you tell me how to maximize this? So you can scale your impact by selling to more people at different price points, and you have a complete transformation journey that takes them from A to B. So that's the scale the impact piece.
Yeah. I love that you start with being really clear on what's the problem you're solving, who you're solving it for. So who's the dream client, and what's the journey you're taking them on, and then looking at that transformation as a point. Here's the before state. So in the podcasting example, somebody that doesn't have a podcast and may well benefit from having a podcast, and the after state, if you like, is they're an authority in their space through the use of the podcast and everything associated with it. But on that journey, there's different entry points for different people, which is exactly what you described. And I love that, because people talk about this idea of the funnel, which I just hate that whole funnel idea. I mean, the
I'm rolling my eyes at the time, but cannot see this. Yeah.
But it's kind of like people come in at one place and they all go through the same process. The process should be consistent, but people come into that journey at different places, exactly the way you described it.
Yeah, exactly. And that, Jürgen, leads us to the second part of it. How do you then scale your authority? Because then once you have these system pieces clearly identified, the part of the journey that has different entry points, possibly different funnels, because people are different and people want to be treated as different. Nobody wants to be a one size fits all. I mean, it would be great if everybody in the world needed the exact same product, but they don't. They need different things at different times. So you want to offer them different things at different times and be able to articulate that. And then once you have this, you grow your authority by then taking those pieces and figuring out how do you turn on the client attraction system. So we use for client attraction system podcast guesting, podcast hosting, and LinkedIn Executive Roundtable. We're using an Instagram strategy. We're using a LinkedIn strategy. So that then comes once you flushed out what it is and who it is for and how you help them. Once you got these pieces down, then you can turn on the amplification and start figuring out, how do I get these leads in and how do I convert these leads into prospects? And I want to be very clear because there's a lot of things that are changing a bit. And I bet, Jürgen, you're seeing this too, is this like that you think you're going to get on a phone call and you sell a $25,000 product or mastermind in 45 minutes. That's just really not happening right now, unless you are a Tony Robbins, perhaps. But even he cooks you slowly in a 3-day event to get you to that point to say yes.
Yeah, that's right. I talk a lot about bringing humanity back into marketing and into podcasting because in even the Tony Robbins example, I mean, Tony Robbins has the authority, is known. So if you encounter some of his offers, there's a level of trust already there inbuilt because of all the work he's done to get to where he is today. At the same time, though, there is still a question. So if I see an offer from him for $25,000 for his program, there's still a number of questions in my mind. The first one is this the right program for me? Could I work with somebody else and get the same result for a different price? Could I work with somebody else that would be a better fit, that would be a faster result, that maybe I can have more in-person meetings rather than a lot of online because Tony Robbins isn't physically located near where I am. And a whole lot of questions like that come about. And the idea of the 3-day event, of course, that he has is to build that relationship that answers a lot of the questions people would have. So it all starts with building that relationship. So how do you bring kind of relationship into the whole processes and the scaling your impact situation?
Yeah, I had a lot of come to Jesus moments here this year on that, because I think that we all fall into this trap of listening to a lot of this internet marketing that frankly isn't even working so well anymore right now. And what I have noticed is that the perpetual chasing of this next idea and this next idea and this next idea is designed by internet marketers to always want more and to never get to the point where you feel you're complete. So you are going to learn how to speak. You're going to learn how to run a summit. You're going to learn how to sell from stage. You're going to learn how to product launch. You're going to learn how to write a quiz. You're going to learn how to do the funnel hack. You're going to learn how to do this. It is absolutely crazy making, but it never is enough because somebody else comes and says, well, but unless you know how to write, none of this is good, because if you don't know how to write, then you're going to have to pay somebody like $30,000 and 2% of your earnings for writing that sales letter. And so you are in this state of searching for that thing that will help you to solve the issue of running a successful business. And so when I sat down and I said, who do I want to be, right? I think that's the first question that I would really encourage your listeners to think about. Who do you want to be? Do you want to be that hardcore salesperson that knows all the ethical persuasion tricks? I can't even say it with a straight face. That that then goes in and says, well, but imagine what happens if you don't do this, right? I mean, and once you really think about that and you say, do I want this? Is this aligned with who I am? We went and we said, I am going to measure my impact by how much impact I help others make. That puts me now in a predicament, because unless I help others to make their impact, I'm not making my own, right? And we did this as a company on purpose, because we wanted everybody on the team to know that we are measured by what we do for other people. That just sets a different bar. And then the second part is, do I believe in what I do? And if I don't, I better sit down and I look at what I do. And that's what we did. We went in, we looked at every program, we cut all the fat, we focused on these three things, and we said, we know we're really good at this. We know we deliver outstanding results. We know people leave here and write 5-figure contracts sometimes a week after we finished specifically the signature growth system piece. And if I really believe that, and now I have a conversation, I am not in a sales conversation. I'm in a different kind of a conversation. I'm in a, let me hear where you want to go. And let me hear on what the challenges are that you have. And if any of the programs, the three pieces that we offer, helps you to fix it, is it okay if I tell you about that? And then if that resonates with you, then let's talk about on whether or not we are a good fit. Because you have to build a different kind of a relationship now. And it feels much better, Jürgen. I mean, you know, to get out of this, like, I must sell, to shifting that conversation to say, let's just talk about whether or not this is even right for you. And if this is right for you, and if it can help you to get where you want to go, then let's talk about the program. But I'm here to really help you to make your impact. And if I can help you to do that, great. If not, by all means, you know, find someone who does that. And that approach has really skyrocketed our sales, because we are now no longer going in with that, I must close the sale and what's my closing ratio and my deal making, but we go in and we say, let's just figure out if we can help you.
Yeah. Yeah, it's crazy, isn't it? It seems counterintuitive if you change the focus away from the statistics. How many of these calls am I closing? I guess the key focus there is you need to have a certain number of calls with the right people, and then focus on how can I help you, and are we a good fit? When you get to the point of, yes, what we have could help you, then are we a good fit?
And that approach, 100% right. And that is something that is, I think, often misunderstood, is in the vetting process. Not everybody's a client. And that's very difficult for business owners to say, yeah, but that person could benefit. But is it the right client? And if you know, and I was talking to somebody and I gave them a lot of time, and, you know, and then there comes a point where you go, okay, you're going to have to make a decision now, because I can't give you things for free forever. You know who I am, you know how giving I am, but this is the boundary. Now you push the boundary. If you want anything else, you have to pay for it. And then people fall off, because there are people that are just freeloaders. They just want the free stuff. They don't want to pay for it. And then there are other people that go like, no, I don't need to know more. This is exactly what I needed. This is exactly at the right time. And they say, yes, you just have to be detached from the outcome of everything needing to be a sale, but to say, okay, this is right for now. This is not right. This is right for later. This is never going to be right. And then just put them in those buckets and be honest, and then move on and find the next lead and the next prospect and have another meaningful conversation.
Yeah, yeah. And it's all about having those meaningful conversations. And I'm guessing, tell us a little bit about your process for the filtering up front before people get to that conversation, because I'm guessing that's something that can be really well systemized, so that when you spend time having a conversation with somebody, they've already passed through a filter, if you like. They've already qualified as someone who may be a good fit, who may or who would benefit from what you have to offer, who may be a good fit, and who it's worth spending time exploring further.
Yeah, so there's a couple of things we do. So number one, on the podcast, if somebody wants to come on the show, they'll have to do a preliminary call, very much like what you did with me. You want to know if this person is full of it, if they know what they're doing, if they're articulate, if they are trying to push something, if they are genuinely interested in a conversation. And you typically can do that in about a 15, 20-minute conversation. So, after the second guest where the conversation, and forgive me for saying this, was like talking to an Ambien, a sleeping pill, and then you go like, I give this person an hour of my time and I have no value. And you're like, well, but should I be the nice person? You're like, I can't publish this. This is terrible. I mean, nobody gets any value out of it. So you have to can it. So learned that lesson. In the coaching and consulting piece, because my rates are in the several thousand, I understand that at that level, you need to, you can't close. Maybe you can, but maybe I don't want to, or maybe I don't. I wouldn't want that for myself, unless let's say I could work with Tony Robbins privately tomorrow on an island. Right. Then I might not have to talk about this. I might just take $10,000 and put him down and say, count me in. 10 people, Tony Robbins on an island for 2 days. I'm in, because I know I'll get something out of it, but that's based on his reputation. But with everybody else, not so much. With everybody else, you would want to know, okay, let's have a conversation about what am I going to get? What is this about? What will I be learning? How will I be implementing this? Because you have to have these measurements. So we have a process called the uncovery. So, we can sort of make this mutually beneficial. So you go to uncoverysession.com and you take a look at how we structured that. And so we are taking them through an intake form, basically. So before we get on a personal conversation, they have to fill this out, and there's a limit on it. So we give 7 of these away per month, and there's a value. They're valued at $1,500 because we don't want to give this to everybody. We want to give this to people that are ready to take action, right? And we want to see on whether or not they're a good client for us. I don't help people with flushing out the idea. I help people with their unique positioning statement and with the signature growth system and the strategy, but they need to know what they're doing. I can't help them. I did an online course for that. If they need that, they need to go somewhere else. So I need to know that in this intake form, are they an ideal client? Are they potentially a good client, or are they not a client? And accordingly to that, we have automated responses that respond to that. So each part has some sort of a vetting process. We do executive roundtables, so they have to fit a particular customer profile to be even invited into the executive roundtables. So yes, every piece has to have a vetting process. And the more diligent you are, and again, this is counterintuitive, the better the outcome.
Yeah, I love it. It reminds me very much of what we do with the podcast. There is an intake form. There is a 15-minute call where I. Oh,
you're like the boss on that. I've been through the process. Yeah, it's serious.
Yeah,
nobody comes on the show who shouldn't be here.
Exactly, and that's part of the reason. The other part, of course, is that when we come on the show, we know one another. So the conversation is different than when we meet for the first time. The other thing, it is a good filter. So I've had people come back and say, filling out the form is too onerous. You can find out all this information on my LinkedIn profile and on my website. So immediate and initially I found that I was quite annoyed by that, but now I laugh about it because, here's another story I can tell, because clearly that person is not for the podcast. So at that moment, that's end of conversation. I've also had, and this often happens through agencies that pitch people, and if there are any agencies, podcast agencies listen, then take this feedback on board.
Don't be arrogant on behalf of
Yes. Don't be arrogant on behalf of your client and say, no, we're not going to do the pre-call. That's a waste of time. So-and-so has been on 50 podcasts as a guest already. He knows what he's doing, or she knows what she's doing. I've had that as well. And
that's a charmer.
I go back to the agencies and I say, well, I'm sorry, so-and-so is clearly not a good fit for the podcast. I don't want to burn the bridges with the agency, so I will give them the feedback, but I'm pretty clear that this is my process. It's my podcast. This is my process. Here's how you go through it. And I think it's a good practice to have in the whole business. So what you described, I really love it. Because it means
the people are pitching. They're pitching an idea. When you go to media, you have to have a pitch. I mean, you can't just show up at the news station and you say, my name is John Schmidt and I'm amazing. And you can talk to me about anything. You'll never get in the studio in an interview. They're going to say, well, what are you the authority on? Well, I'm the authority on that. Okay. What's the relevant angle you want to talk about? Well, given the situation in the economy right now, I think that a conversation about how can you save money on groceries or, still buy a house and then, refinance it at a lower rate at the first possible opportunity is a viable strategy. Well, now you got people's attention. But just because you think you're good means nothing to us. And here's another thing, right, that I get a lot is his name is her name is Angela, and Angela can talk about entrepreneurship, mindset, overcoming hard times, adversity, meditation. And I said, I'm not going to do the work for you. I'm not going to sit here and ponder over what amongst all the episodes that I've done on how that would fit in. It's your job to say, based upon your podcast being a strategic podcast, here is the strategy that Angela would like to share. Do you think that's a fit? Now we're talking. But that's because people are lazy, Jürgen. And if they're lazy, they just throw spaghetti against the wall and they go like, oh, the world is so mean. No, the world is not mean. You're lazy. Yeah.
And also being honest and being truthful. Like you probably get these as well. I listened to your show and I left it a 5-star review, and it's a great show. I would like to pitch John as a podcast guest, and then they go through all those 1,000 things that John can talk about. And you say, well, did you really listen to the show? Because a lot of 99% of those things are not relevant to what we do on the show. And also, you didn't mention which episode you listened to, and I can't see any new 5-star reviews that I can identify to you. I can see some reviews, but I know who gave me those. They're not from you.
And I mean, there's, I don't have a problem with people owning stuff, right? If somebody says, listen, I did a video specifically for you. I had one guest who did like a 3-minute video specifically for me. And he says, I know it's a show on strategy, and here's a strategy I think your listeners could benefit from. And then he didn't show for the interview. And because he had put the effort in it, I knew something must have happened, because somebody who puts that kind of effort in it isn't just going to be a no-show. Turns out he got very violently ill with COVID. and was out cold for like 10 days. So he didn't need to listen to all the episodes. Just don't lie about it.
Exactly.
Just say, listen, this sounds like a business growth architect show. I see, I read the description. It says it's a strategy show. Can we go on a preliminary call and discuss if there's, I have a couple of ideas for you. Just be honest about what you can do instead of lying about what you didn't do, because we are going to find out.
Yeah. And I think that's a wonderful example. And I encourage people to always do a personalized video when they're pitching to somebody, whether it's for a podcast or anything else, and then be honest like that. And the other great thing about that example is the person didn't just do that personalized video. They took at least a little bit of time to research what's the podcast about in this case. So research what they're talking about. And then they focused on what value could I add to what you are doing, which is a totally different approach to I'm the expert on XYZ and I want to go on your podcast.
Yeah, and sometimes what happens is that you have somebody who comes with an idea and you go, I'm no matter what I do, I can't make it work. I had this with one person, and I know it's a person who does a lot of podcast interviews, but they came up with an idea on how to scale the unscalable, which is in direct opposition to what I do. I'm all about strategy. So unless you can put a strategy behind what you do, it's not a match for this podcast, no matter how good you are. And I'm on the phone and, and he's a nice guy and I'm trying. And then finally I said, look, I don't know how I'm going to make this fit, because you have sort of this more a spontaneous, person-based giving strategy, but it's not a strategy. It's an idea, right? That you promote. But unless it's an actual physical strategy that people can repeat, I can't do it. And we had to, and I had to cut him loose. I mean, it just wasn't right.
Yeah. Yeah. So there's an important message there as well. And that applies to all businesses. If you realize it's not a good fit, it's best to move on. And there are ways to do that elegantly and still provide value to the person. So you might have said, there's another podcast or there's another coach that might be better suited to you. Go check them out.
Yeah, exactly. And another example maybe that your listeners might find helpful, I did have somebody and it just felt like they hadn't their business model flushed out enough yet. And so that's what I said, look, I know you're onto something, but it just doesn't feel like you've nailed it yet. So let's just shelve it for now. Check back in with me. But I'll be happy to do a complimentary strategy session with you to maybe help you brainstorm it. And we did, and it was somebody who then turns out was a Christian and very much rooted in his faith. And he had struggled with bringing that piece into his work. And once we talked about it and it was very clear that that was his driving force, then I said to him, just do it. I mean, if you believe in God and if you believe that God is the driving force behind everything, then who are you to say no when you're being called, right? I mean, in this particular setting, that was so clear to me. And subsequently, he shifted his entire model to make that now not sort of, oh, and by the way, we also do, to one of the centerpieces, and he's doing gangbusters because of that. So sometimes it wasn't right for the show at the time because the message didn't feel congruent, but it doesn't mean that we don't have to help each other. We still can help each other.
Yeah. And that's a really great point as well. All right. Well, this is fabulous, Beate. We could go on talking filtering systems and structure for ages.
I
think it's
forever,
a good point
jazz
now.
hands.
I think it's a good point to move on to the buzz because that's part of our process. It's about that time, which is our innovation round. And it's the same 5 questions that I ask of every guest. So the idea is you'll give some really inspiring answers that will prompt some action from the listener today.
Of course.
Ready?
Yes.
What's the number one thing anyone needs to do to be more innovative?
Detach yourself from having to win every single time and accept that failure is a natural process of reduction, if you so want to. That just tells you that if something doesn't work, just keep moving until you find things that do work.
Yeah, I love it. And I think the whole philosophy of it's not about you. So telling yourself it's not about you, whether that is when there's a success or when there's a failure, obviously you can look at, okay, that wasn't successful. What do I learn from that? And you can say, that was successful. What do I learn from that? In both cases, kind of removing yourself, detaching yourself, not making it about you all the time is going to be hugely beneficial.
It's really very, very rarely about you because people are so busy worrying about that it's about them.
That's right. Yes, there's only one person that worries a lot about you, and that's you.
That's you, yourself, yeah. 100%.
All right. Now, what's the best thing you've done to develop new ideas?
It is to give myself permission to step away and take time off. I think that innovation is driven by external influences. So if you are always in your own space and all you do is work, there is nothing that changes the cadence. It's like, the definition of insanity, keep doing the same thing and expect a different result. So if you change a thing, if it's something simple like go to lunch, or instead of having the coffee to go, have the coffee to sit down, like, people in Europe do, and give yourself these like moments in between to observe, to be present, and to allow this new information come in. Because then what happens is you hear something and you go, what did you just say? Or it's a smell, or it's an article that you read, waiting somewhere for someone because they were late, but really try to keep an open mind. I don't believe that telling people that have to be productive 24/7 is good. And I don't know about you, Jürgen, but that's been really bothering me lately a lot, is that people say, how to be more productive. I think we're plenty productive. I think what we need to learn how to do is to decompress so that we allow these ideas to come in, so that we then can operate at our highest level and not at the most tactical, functional level.
Yeah, that's wonderful advice. And I've got a great example of that this week. So I was staying at my daughter's apartment. So that's an hour or more from us. I was staying there, essentially cat sitting for her while she was away over a long weekend. And because the Melbourne Zoo is nearby and I'm a member of the zoo, so I have free entry whenever I like, I thought, what a great opportunity to go visit the zoo. And I thought, but I'm not going to do that on the weekend because it's very busy on the weekend. But Monday morning is probably very quiet. And I like to be there when it's quiet because the animals are more active and you get to see more. You don't have this rush of people. And I thought, well, so I'll take Monday off. So I decided, because Sunday I went for a morning bike ride, which I like to do. And in the afternoon it rained. So the weather wasn't very good. And I thought, okay, I'm going to spend Sunday afternoon doing the work that I would have done Monday, so that I can take Monday off and be completely relaxed about it. And in 2 hours on Sunday afternoon, I essentially did the work that I normally take all of Monday to do. And I thought, isn't that amazing? I thought all of a sudden there's this different productivity. And I put it down to the fact that I was so focused and there was another objective on top of the objective for the tasks that I had to do. And that was to free up Monday. And I felt really good about it. And then I still had Sunday evening to myself.
It's an excellent example. That's exactly what happens is when you take yourself out of the stress of the having to do something in X and X and X, then suddenly it flows differently. And that's what my wish is for all of your listeners to do that. And while we're at it, I just want to make sure that I'll give you the plug you so richly deserve. So for all of you listening, you know, Jürgen does this as a labor of love. So will you please go to wherever you pick up this podcast and give him a 5-star rating, plus write maybe one line about this episode or another episode that inspired you, and share it with one other person that needs to hear what we were talking about today. Excellent.
Thank you. I love that. All right. Now, what's a favorite resource you use most often?
Podcast. I mean, I listen to podcasts constantly, and it's always because you hear people talk, and it's doing exactly what we just spoke about, Jürgen. It gives you these ideas of, oh, that's a really good quote. Oh, I never thought about it like that. And it just opens new pathways. So I'm a little bit of an information junkie. I read and listen to just about anything.
Yeah, it's great. And I'm a bit like you on that. And the key thing, though, is to keep track of those ideas and actually start implementing a few things.
How much time do we have to talk about that?
Maybe another episode.
I know there might be another episode, the implementation episode. It's like, what do you do with all these ideas? Yes.
Yeah. Excellent. All right. Now, what's the best way to keep a client on track?
Accountability implementation is that to keep clients on track is that there's one piece where you do the work and you design what you are going to do. And then there's a second piece where there has to be some sort of accountability. I believe keeping people on track is best done with a project management software. We are very tactical about that. We love Asana. And we put a lot of these workflows and processes in Asana, and we recommend all of our clients to do the same, because that's how you create repeatable processes, onboarding processes, SOP processes, standard operational procedures. And you can see as you're handing things off that they're actually being done. And the one thing that I prohibit anybody who's listening from doing is please do not manage by email.
Yeah. Yes, there's so many good project management systems out there. Asana is definitely a really good one. We use that for a long time. And having that system and having the processes within that project management system is definitely the way to go, because that saves so much time. And everybody knows this is where I find the task to be done. This is where I find the process to do it. And then it's all... Everybody has visibility as well, which is the accountability part.
100%.
All right. Finally, for the buzz round, what's the number one thing anyone can do to differentiate themselves?
Very much like a lot of things we talked about today, you got to take the thing that you probably think is the thing you don't want to talk about and make that the centerpiece. So, which is, again, I think we did like, what's the third counterintuitive thing that we did today is, I give you like an example. I was doing a workshop once for Merck Pharmaceuticals, and it was about helping people to do what we call the unapologetic value proposition, which is like the differentiation factor and how they can show up stronger. And that ties in a lot with what we do with our clients and, doing their value proposition. And so the guy walks in and he says like, yeah, I don't really know. I don't think I have a differentiation factor, but I had watched him. And everywhere he went, everybody says, hey, Scott. Hey, so good to see you, Scott. Oh, my God, Scott, you're looking amazing today. Scott. And I said to him, Scott, that is it possible that anywhere you go that people just immediately calm down and you are like the great peacemaker and the bringer of balance to everything? He says, I guess so. And everybody goes like, yeah, that's exactly right. Whenever you're in the room, I said, can we make this the hero? He says, oh, that's a thing. I said, that's the thing. If you think that it's really nothing because it's so natural to you, on whether that's Excel pivot tables or whether that's speaking or whether that's putting people at ease or whether that's creating strategies or systems, and you go like, doesn't everybody know how to do that? That's usually the thing.
Yeah. Yeah. That's brilliant. And it reminds me, because we often take those things that come so naturally to us for granted, and it takes somebody else to point it out. And I've had this experience a number of times when I've done something on the computer with a client and I'm just in the flow, do things, and all of a sudden they say, that's amazing. How did you do that? And I was, what? I haven't done anything. No, that thing. And so it turns out that what I'm taking totally for granted, this person thinks it's hugely amazing. And when I then stop and take the time to explain what I've just done, which often is a challenge in and of itself in that sort of situation, because whatever it is, it just comes so naturally to me to then articulate a process that I could teach somebody else is quite a challenge. So that's something that is a good learning experience for me. But at that point, then I realized that I've just given this other person immense value. Whereas I thought, as you said, doesn't everybody know how to do that?
Yeah, this is probably the number one thing I think people get wrong a lot, because this just ties into how our entire process has been set up, how our structure has been set up from the get-go, from the first time you go into the educational system. So you're a brilliant writer, you're a great artist, and then the teacher goes with a stern face and says you suck in math, and then you get just destroyed because it's the one subject you're not good at, whereas you're good in everything else. And so there is just traditionally an attention that is given to things that you're not good at, and then it's almost like Schadenfreude, like, right, where they then go and they look at you and they say, see, you think you're such a good writer, you think you're such a good artist, but your math is terrible. And what you should say, you should say, you are absolutely right, I am a great writer and I'm a phenomenal artist. Who needs math? I have people for that.
Yeah. Very good. All right, Beate, this has been fabulous. There's a couple of touch points there that I think we could build several episodes off as well.
Yeah, I know, right?
But it is time to wrap up. So where can people find out more about the work you do, maybe even reach out and say thanks for what you've shared today?
Yes. So number one, I'm pretty visible on social media. So on LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, just find me under either The Growth Architect or Beate Chelette. We also have a YouTube channel. Check out my show, The Business Growth Architect Show, if you're interested in strategy. And for those of you who've been listening and say, well, can I do something? Yes, you can. If you are wanting to figure out who your ideal target client is, we have made that piece for absolute free. It's at airtightavatar.com. We narrowed it down to 15 minutes. So you can, in 15 minutes, do your customer client profile. And we've really perfected that. And the other thing, if you are not sure why your business is not growing, you can take our quiz. That is, how do you find out what your number one business growth blocker is? You go to growthblockerquiz.com. There's a lot of growth and blocking going on. So it's growthblockerquiz.com. And reach out. I'm always happy to hear what you're taking away, if there was an aha, because that's why we do this. We're here to help you and we're here to support you in growing your business.
Excellent. All right. Well, as always, we'll have all those links in the show notes, so it's easy to click straight through. And I'll have to check out your ideal client exercise and see how it compares with mine. I might learn something.
Knowing you, yours is probably pretty well thought out.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Ours might take longer than 15 minutes, so I might be able to learn how we can streamline it a little. All right, Beate, what action would you like our listener to take as a result of our conversation today?
I definitely would like our listeners to really think about what's the thing that makes you unique and special. And are you actually talking about that in such a way that other people understand why that makes you so special? Because that, I think, to me, is often the thing that people really struggle with because they are in this perfectionism chase their entire lives. But to say, if you were good enough, which you are, and you already have everything and you already are everything that you need to be, what do you need to tell people about you where they know you're the real deal? Work on that, take that away, make that the hero, tell everybody about it.
Wonderful. I love that. And well, actually, it's a good idea to get some input from other people on that as well.
Yeah.
As in the example Beate shared with us earlier about Scott.
Yeah,
trying to remember
because
the name.
yeah, exactly. Well, one of the tangible pieces that you can do, let's just add that real quick, is, when I have clients that have these confidence issues, I tell them to call 10 business associates or people they worked with, not so much family, but external people that don't know the stuff that goes on at home, and ask them what they like about you or what they appreciate about you. And then when you hear the same thing 6 times, it's probably a thing.
Wonderful. That's a great suggestion. All right. But thanks so much for sharing your time and your insights with us so generously today. I think there's lots of lessons, lots of different takeaways. We've got a pretty clear call to action at the end there. And I'm sure this will be hugely valuable to the listener. So thanks so much, and please do stay in touch.